2020 Vision, and tonight we're going to focus actually in on the White House briefing room, which today feels a whole lot more like a campaign press office. Speaking of the campaign, Election Day now just 53 days away. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, she's under fire for a pair of comments she made this week. The first was on Wednesday, as reporters asked directly about the president's comments to Woodward that showed he lied to the American public about the risks of COVID.
The president has never lied to the American public on COVID. The president was expressing calm, and his actions reflect that.
That answer, once people pick their chins off the floor here, certainly rubbed people the wrong way, including former Clinton Press Secretary Joe Lockhart. He served during the Clinton impeachment, but he refused to lie to protect his boss, writing on CNN.com that Kayleigh McEnany has crossed a line, adding that her answer is patently false. The president has repeatedly lied to the American public about the coronavirus and the government's handling of the pandemic. He is now lying about lying. Claiming otherwise, McEnany reneged on the very promise she made to reporters on her first day as press secretary when she said she would never lie to them. He concludes by saying the president has never lied to the American public. Her tenure as press secretary has officially come to an end, and her role as a state propagandist has now been confirmed. Then, in an interview with Fox just yesterday, McEnany got a question a lot of us have been wondering. Do you think we're going to have a winner on November 3rd? But McEnany's answer seems to set the stage for all sorts of presidential shenanigans if we don't get a winner on that Tuesday in November.
What we want election night to look like is a system that's fair, a situation where we know who the president of the United States is on election night. That's how the system is supposed to work. And that's ultimately what we're looking for and what we're hoping for.
For more on this, let's bring in another Clinton White House Press Secretary, Mike McCurry. He worked the briefing room from 94 to 98. Mike, I appreciate, as always, you giving me a few. And when I saw Lockhart's piece and I never saw McEnany, I remember towards the end of your time as a press secretary, I felt you physically uncomfortable when more of the stuff came out with Lewinsky, that the last place you wanted to be was in that briefing room, and that you weren't going to lie for behavior that you yourself found to be indefensible. What's it like having to stand in front of questions that you know are coming, but you're trying to thread that line between throwing your boss under a bus but also not lying? I got to imagine that's a tough place to be.
Well, it is a very tough place to be. And so what I did was very simple calculation. I said, I will rely on what the lawyers tell me to say, and I will stick to it and not deviate from anything that I am told by the White House counsel or the White House lawyers that I'm authorized to say. And that proved to be a very useful strategy because I never speculated. I didn't, try to explain away things that I didn't know what the truth was really about. And I think that's the role you got to be in. You've got to, try to protect the public's interest in what's going on and the public's need to know. But you have to also respect the government's obligation to tell the truth. And that's a very delicate balance for a White House press secretary.
No, but it's not the job of the press secretary. Forget about lying, okay? But to go out and speculate, it's not the job of even the White House to decide when an election is official or not. And to 50 some odd days from the election, to so casually just say you might not respect the results that come in, I mean, beyond really dangerous. What is the press secretary's job becoming nowadays?
Well, frankly, the job doesn't really exist anymore. It stopped with the current president. And, the way I looked at the job was you had the responsibility to go out, answer the legitimate questions that the press corps would have every day. Yes, you should put your own spin on it and kind of give what your own administration's view was on certain issues, but try to do that delicately with a certain amount of credibility and, get off the podium as fast as you could. That was my role, my job every day. But the White House press briefing for practical purposes doesn't really exist anymore.
I'm always curious, what were the kind of questions that you dreaded the most? Maybe it's a different age, but I always sometimes think the press corps shouldn't get together and figure the questions they're going to ask. I'm not saying that, but there seems to be in the opportunities, even with the president directly, where you'd wish there would be more follow-up or more directness or more pinning down. I know easier said than done, but you were on the other side of it. What were some of the questions that you were like, oh, geez, I don't know how to spin this?
A lot of White House reporters like to embellish their questions with a lot of, build up in the questions, which was always good because then you could kind of pick out and choose what you really wanted to respond to. But the hardest ones were the ones that just sort of said factually, what's going on here? Yes or no? And then you had to really kind of do a gut check and figure out, how do I answer that question? And, I firmly believe the White House press briefing is an important device to kind of keep the American people informed, but it's not become that in the current administration. It's really kind of a platform for telling whatever story they want to tell every day, and that doesn't serve the interests of the American people.
I'm curious your reaction to the Woodward book, but in two ways. Obviously, the substance in it, but the idea. I could just imagine if your old boss was going to talk 18 times without any of you guys in the room to Woodward and to call him all hours of the night, you would have tackled him or taken away his phone. I mean, I don't know anybody that could control Trump, to be fair, but at the same time, how did they let Woodward have this kind of access given the lack of self-control of Trump?
Well, I have to plead guilty because I had my own encounters with Bob Woodward and some of the books he wrote about the Clinton years. And so I didn't always come off all that well in some of those books. He is very artful at kind of guiding you into conversations and then getting you to let your hair down and let you say things that maybe you probably otherwise should not say. And in some respects, that's a good repertorial technique, but on the other hand, sometimes he can be a little beguiling in the way he does stuff.
Frank Rich had a piece on, if you saw it today, where he basically said, there's no more shocking anymore. Even with these unbelievable tell-all books, even from family members of Trump, even from people that were on the inside of Trump, even from his fixer, or now with all the interviews that Woodward got from him, you can't shock anymore. Do you believe that, or do you think there'll be some cumulative effect that will change minds in the electorate for anyone who inexplicably is still on the fence?
I don't honestly know the answer to that. I think there's some percentage of the vote that is going to be for Trump all the time. I hope there would be some people who, out of conviction, voted for Donald Trump because, one, they didn't like Hillary Clinton, and, there are a lot of reasons for that. Two, they wanted something that would really shake up the system and bring something different, and they thought Trump would bring that to bear. But I hope a lot of them step back now and think and say, I apologize. I made a bad mistake. I thought this guy was going to be the right person for the country, and he was not. And, that takes a lot of self-reckoning for someone to sort of say, I made a bad decision when I voted.
Last thing, Mike, like many people, one of my kids, said, hey, what show should I binge? And I said, you never watch West Wing. And she's now a freshman in college, so she watched it, actually watched it multiple times and said, God, I wish government was really like that. And I said, believe it or not, not that long ago it was. People really believed in it. I don't know, and I'm curious your answer more than my thought. What's disappointed you more in the last 3.5 years? The amount of people who ascribe to the way that Trump looks at the world, or that the institutions that I thought would never let somebody like him get us to where we are right now were not as rock solid as I thought? That the checks and balances that I thought would stop so many things from happening just weren't there. What has surprised you in a negative way, more of those two?
Well, I guess, that's a tough question. I think it's the paucity of truth-telling by some of the institutions that we rely upon. I do a lot of work in the faith community, as I think you know. There's a role that institutions have to play to kind of stand up and hold accountable those who are in power. And I think a lot of them have lost their voice in this time. And I think, part of it is they're cowered by Trump. They fear being called out. But this is a moment when you really sort of see what we're made of. What do we really believe? What do we profess? What do we really stand up and say that we believe in?
Mike, I appreciate it as always. Thank you so much for making time for us.
It's great. Always good to be with you.
You as well. All right, everyone. When we come back, there is more going on today than just remembering and the looming election, but also the wildfires that are burning up several states out west, hitting California and Oregon particularly hard. So bad right now in Oregon that 10% of the state's population are being forced to evacuate.